My name is Perrin. Okay, we're recording. My name is Perrin, Ireland. I am an illustrator, a storyteller, a performer, and I was the inaugural artist in residence at the Carpenter's Boat Shop in June of this year. My hmm, my studio is in Brooklyn, New York. And so coming up to Maine, it was a joy to spend time at the Carpenter's Boat Shop, getting to be outside while I drew. Um, and my practice pursues a few questions that you will see illustrated throughout the rest of my talk. I am interested in what it looks like to make stories about non-human protagonists. I'm interested in looking at life from the perspective of animals and featuring animals as the stars of the show in a way I think in a sixth mass extinction might actually be healthy and beneficial. I'm interested in getting science more accessible by more people as quickly as possible. And so my practice is a kind of obsessive chronicling of animals, and it's an obsession with learning as much as I can about animals and with sharing that as quickly as I can. So I often am sharing work when it's wet. I'm sharing work immediately. I maintain a lot of contact with the viewer. That's a really important part of my practice. I also have grown up spending summers on the coast of Maine. And so Maine is throughout all of my work, especially a deep love of oceans and a commitment to ocean and an interest in investigating oceans from the perspective of an artist. And my family has maintained a long-term relationship with the Carpenter's Boat Shop. And so it feels really exciting and special to me that Alicia and I together in new ways are kind of forming what this latest generation of that relationship might look like. So throughout my childhood, there was a great love of animals. I used to, and it manifested in particular ways. I used to write letters to the editor of Ranger Rick magazine, of which I was an avid subscriber. And I wanted to let them know what was happening to animals in my neighborhood. And Ranger Rick did not publish my letters to the editor. And I don't know if all kids were specifically focused on that, but I would get back these postcards from them in this font that was meant to look like handwriting font, and I knew it wasn't. And so I knew no one had actually responded to my letter, and they hadn't published my letter to the editor. And you will see manifestations of that long simmering resentment in later work. Hello, my whole family just joined. Hi, Bob. Hi, Mom and Dad. Those are some of the Irelands that love the Carpenter's Boat Shop. So after I graduated from high school, where I was mostly focused on art and writing, with the support of my parents, I took a year off and I went and worked as an intern at a research lab called the Dolphin Institute, the Koala Basin Marine Mammal Lab, which was on Waikiki Beach in Hawaii. And that experience was formative for me for a few reasons. This is me, and this is a dolphin. A long-term obsession is the dolphin. Since before I can remember, I was extremely focused on dolphins, and that was supported throughout my childhood by many people in my life. And at the Dolphin Institute, a few really important things happened for me. One is I learned that I was unintentionally quite good at finding good scientists and get weaseling my way into their lives. So I stumbled into the lab of Dr. Lou Herman. And if you are at all a scholar of the history of dolphin cognition research, there's basically John C. Lilly, who many of you children of the 60s and 70s may remember. And then there's Lou Herman. And the work that they were doing at the Dolphin Institute with Phoenix, Akekamai, and Hiapo, who were 3 Atlantic bottlenose dolphins in captivity, was really groundbreaking work in advancing our understanding of what dolphins are capable of cognitively. Also at that lab, those dolphins were having a really hard time in captivity. And there was stuff going on at the lab when I was there that really shaped the scientific questions I felt comfortable asking in certain contexts. I also spent the second half of that year at art school in Greece. And so it was a perfect split that year for me of learning about animals and also drawing. I then went to Brown University, where I began studying biology. And at Brown, there are a few things that are kind of important for me in terms of the development of the set of questions that my practice seeks to answer and the way that I pursue answering them. At Brown, I knew that I wanted to study animals with a simpler central nervous system than dolphins. I was deeply troubled by what it looked like to make a really rigorous controlled experiment with dolphins. And I wanted to just like dissect some jellyfish for a while with a little less care about what the impact might be to the animal in question. And I went into the office of the undergraduate biology advisor while I was picking my major. And she was a woman named Marjorie Thompson. And hanging above her desk was a really beautiful rendering of a deer skull. And I complimented her on the drawing. I really liked it. And she said, "Oh, thank you so much. I made that when I was in my RISD Science Illustration graduate program." And I was like, bingo, bango. I found my gal. And she kind of coached me into focusing. Brown has no core requirements, which makes it the perfect place for a student like me. And she supported me in really studying biology for art and naming that I was doing that and working with scientists really closely to draw what they were finding. So this is a scan of my sophomore year invertebrate zoology sketchbook. And one of the important things that started happening in my labs is my fellow students started asking me for my drawings, and I would let them know we could study together, even though I was never the strongest in any of my science classes. And what they let me know is that they actually wanted the art, and they wanted the art for their walls, which began to shape a little bit about what I thought could be possible with my drawing. I began pursuing my undergraduate degree as a Bachelor of the Arts in human biology with a focus in vertebrate embryology, but a thesis in the developmental biology of marine cnidaria. This is just some sketchbooks of vertebrate embryology labs. And one of the things that I found when we were looking at animals under the microscope and I was drawing them in an age of really good imaging technology is that what's fun about drawing science is that there are gaps in knowledge that require illustrators to be effectively communicated about. So I don't know if any of you are scientists in the room, but in my experience at that time, nigh on 20 years ago, in vertebrate embryology discussions, they would be like, so we know that this happens in the developing embryo. And then a couple of weeks later, we know this other thing happens, but we don't really know what happens in between, and there's no images that exist of it. And I had this spark where I realized that there might be roles for people in helping folks conceptualize what was happening in science in advance of us necessarily being able to name it or image it with technology. And I found this in my lab notebook today, and I guess it's cool that I can pursue a thought for years and years, and maybe it means I don't have that much imagination. But the general gist is I hate being bored. I want to make stories, and I want to make stories quickly through mark making, and I'm still doing it. So when I left Brown, I left in the Great Recession, and I got some day jobs where I was living in Nashville, Tennessee. And a couple of important things happened for me at that juncture in my career. One of them is that I did a sort of education of evolution like course, where it was a kind of science communication course that I was doing online. And I was living in Tennessee, and I decided to focus on the history of education about evolution. And for those of you that remember your history of evolution debates in America, Tennessee is a pretty great place to be if you want to understand the history of the battle between religion and science, because it is where the Scopes monkey trial unfolded to great national fanfare at the time. That's when science trials were blockbusters and everybody was listening on the radio. And my advisor in that course said to me, you need to get on Twitter and you need to join this community that I'm part of called Science Online. I think they'll like your drawings. And I got on Twitter And I also got a job in Nashville as a visual facilitator. So I was going around the country to visioning and brainstorming sessions, and we were drawing what was happening in those conversations. So Fortune 500 visioning sessions, conferences, workshops, we would show up and we would set up these portable walls or these kind of like flip cards, and we would visually capture what was happening in those conversations. And because I was entering a conversation with scientists on Twitter, where I would basically, the way that I hijacked those conversations is there would be a paper that would come out, people would tweet about it, I would draw the key findings, I would tweet it, and the scientists would freak out. It was as if like nobody had ever, it felt like there was this huge need that I was meeting with my kind of little doodles at the time. And they began paying for me to come draw their conferences and to come facilitate and doodle the conversations that they were having and the way that they were trying to get out of the lab and into conversations with people. So this is me at the California Academy of the Sciences, drawing their 2016 Women in Science Summit, getting to scribe talks by people like Jane Goodall, Joan Roughgarden, an incredible scientist who has done a lot to transform the way we think about gender and sex in science. I was at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, the National Museum of History, like amazing conversations that people really embraced me coming to doodle what they were talking about. So it's live and it's really rough. And the image on the left is an image that I captured a talk by a guy named Mark Cruz, who is a physicist at Duke University. And this was right around the time that Higgs boson research was coming out. And as you may recall, Higgs is the antiparticle that if it gets smashed really hard, essentially makes matter. And it's part of the conversation about sort of the dawn of life in the universe. And as a doodler, what's really fun about positioning myself as an illustrator who kind of works rough and fast is like, yeah, I'll draw your Higgs. I'll draw your Higgs, no problem. And this physicist got in touch with me for nearly a decade after this talk, letting me know that he had brought it back to his lab. He had put it up in the lab. And when he was trying to have conversations with people about the research, they would be distracted by actually seeing Higgs visualized. And it was such a relief to him to be able to laugh about the playful image with them and move forward in the conversation about it. And so I began to really understand the hunger that there was in the sciences for this kind of work. On the right is an image that I made when I also would go to a lot of science communication and science writer conferences. And so this is a couple of old friends, in science writing spaces talking about basically reading thrillers and writing science articles a little more that way. So both being in the conversation about how the production of science communication happens and also working with scientists to communicate their work more accessibly. So then I started having conversations with the ocean scientists at the Natural Resources Defense Council. When I was living in Nashville, a great family friend is on the board of the NRDC, and multiple people in my life sent me an article from the New York Times Magazine that described a court case that NRDC was involved in, where they were suing the US Navy for sonar in prime blue whale breeding and feeding and migration grounds that they believed was causing harm to blue whales. And the case was legally groundbreaking in terms of animal justice and animal ethics, in that the plaintiff was a blue whale. And I read that article and I knew those were my people. I had to go work there. I really wanted to be part of that. I was so excited about that they were taking these animals that seriously. So this dear family friend connected me with a couple of these ocean scientists, and we started having conversations. I began working for them on a contract basis. I made a video with them about the Obama's national ocean policy. And then I went in-house with NRDC and I became a kind of visual science storyteller for them, which I then did essentially for the next 10 years. And these are some sketches of puffins that I made when I was working on a video for them that I'm going to show you in full that we did in partnership with Steve Kress, who I'm sure many of you know at Hog Island Audubon Camp. I'm going to see if it's going to let me hold on, my friends. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to move through things. Alicia, do you know how to escape out of? Oh, okay, let's see. Will this work? Okay. Can you all see this? The puffins or the little, okay. Who doesn't love an Atlantic puffin? Those soulful eyes, that upright waddle, the shock of orange, all in a package that stands no taller than 8 inches. Can you hear it? What isn't immediately apparent about this delightful bird is that it happens to float at the nexus of some big environmental laws.
Yes, we can hear you.
At first glance, they might seem unrelated, but together they mean life or death for puffins and other migratory seabird species. Puffins were almost hunted to extinction during the late 19th century. They had disappeared entirely from the coast of Maine.
No,
Then came the first law to the rescue. You can hear it, but you can't see video.
That's right. I don't know if I don't know what other people's
Is
situation.
that happening for all of you?
Yep. That's correct. We can hear you, but it's a static picture of like watercolor water.
Yeah, check.
Yeah, no video here either.
We can see the pictures on the left of the screen.
Okay, I know what I did. Bear with me, my friends.
Okay, no rush.
Here we go. What do you make of that?
There you go.
Promising.
Who doesn't
Okay.
love an Atlantic puffin?
A puffin just landed.
Eyes, that upright waddle, the shock of orange, all in a package that stands no taller than 8 inches. What
Good.
isn't immediately apparent about this delightful bird is that it happens to float at the nexus of some big environmental laws. At first glance, they might seem unrelated, but together they mean life or death for puffins and other migratory seabird species. Puffins were almost hunted to extinction during the late 19th century. They had disappeared entirely from the coast of Maine by 1885. Then came the first law to the rescue.
The Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 made it illegal to hunt or sell migratory birds and their feathers and eggs. They became protected by it. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act remains the backbone of bird conservation in North America.
Flash forward to the 1970s, when Steve Kress, working with the National Audubon Society, successfully reintroduced puffins to Eastern Egg Rock in Maine. As of summer 2018, there were 178 nesting pairs on the island. Until the Trump administration gutted it, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act also protected birds
I
like
think the
puffins,
video is
oil
frozen
spills,
again.
and other industrial harms. What that law didn't do, though, is protect the bird's food supply. For that, we owe thanks to another law, one rooted in protecting the
It's just the first 2 seconds.
Wonderful.
Right. Now and forward.
So you're not seeing the live video. Okay, well, here's what we're gonna do. It just showed you 2 seconds.
It was longer than that, but it froze on one of the puffins.
Okay.
Yeah, we were able to hear the voice perfectly, but the video frame was stuck at 2 seconds.
Well, I don't like that one bit. Okay, I'm going to put the link to the video in the chat. I'm going to keep going, and I encourage you to look at it later because it's, sweet home territory of the coast of Maine. What I'll say about that video and what I loved about being at NRDC is that is a video that's arguing for 3 major environmental laws being really important to an 8-inch bird. And I really loved being in-house, working really deeply with scientists and wonks, like wonks. I mean, I love diving into a white paper and figuring out how to make it juicy and accessible to people. I think it is. Those scientists think it is, but maybe not everybody wants to read the full white paper. And so those are the kinds of projects where also getting to collaborate with scientists that have been doing the field studies for 40 years is so rewarding and exciting. I'm going to try to show you another video. Okay, let's go back to sharing this. Let's go to play. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's see if this works.
Very few people get to actually see our ocean depths for themselves. I had to gather my courage to go down to 1,500 feet in a submersible the first time I did it. But once I descended to the deep sea, it changed my relationship to this planet. You know, this is the first and only place in the Atlantic where marine mammals can swim at low risk of getting entangled in some kind of fishing gear. Obama closed it to industrial fishing. And you have these amazing deep divers of the ocean out there, like sperm whales, who can submerge for up to 2 hours at a time while they hunt for food. These canyons and seamounts lie on the edge of our continent, but they're also the beginning of the deep sea, which is the dominant ecosystem on Earth. Our planet has a long and ancient history. As you descend into the ocean, into this truly alien world, it feels like being in a time machine, seeing geological epochs go by. Being at this depth taught me that we are really interlopers into a world that isn't only ours. At first I thought being at the bottom of the sea was like being on a different planet. But then I realized, wait a minute, no, this is Earth. The truth is 70% of our planet is ocean. So we land dwellers are really the minority. And honestly, it feels wrong as visitors to demand to use every inch of this planet for our sole benefit. All we're asking is this, that we set aside these very precious and delicate areas so that they can exist on Earth along with us in perpetuity.
So that video, a production like that, this is about 1.5 minute reel of a video that is about 5.5 minutes. And production on that is about 200 or 300 drawings on my part, working with an animator that at that point I had worked with for about 5 years. My end doing those drawings takes about 3 weeks. That was a video where we were advocating for the Northeast Coral Canyon's national seamount that Obama set aside as a national monument, which is one way to establish marine protected areas. And as I'm sure many of you know, the data is indicating that marine protected areas really work. They're really effective. And yeah, that is a scientist that got to go down in a submersible and actually see that part of the world. And, you know, putting forward the idea that not much of the planet is where we live and most of it is that ecosystem is really interesting to me. Other fun stuff I got to do in my 10 years at NRDC was go to Paris to the COP15 climate conference, which was incidentally or not chaired by Christiana Figueres, and an all-women team passed the first international climate deal that they were able to reach. I don't know if you find that to be a coincidence or not, but I got to go and bop around Paris and doodle and then post it on NRDC's social media, posted on NRDC's blogs. And it was really fun to be there in all the energy of the youth activism and be covering all of these side talks and be kind of outside the blue area every day, getting reports out of what was happening in Kerry, you know, John Kerry being with India till 4 in the morning. And it was just a really fun thing to get to do at that juncture in my career. And in June, I decided it was time to embark on other journeys. I think one of the things that's great about being in-house is that you get paid to learn a ton and to collaborate really deeply with people. And what's exciting to me about working as an independent artist is really kind of building out what my specific vision is outside of that. So I continue to be in the studio drawing, obsessively chronicling in as vibrant tones as I can the creatures of this world. And I've been working on a few projects that I wanted to tell you a little bit about before I show you some of the work that happened at the Carpenter's Boat Shop this summer. I started in the pandemic a mail art project where initially about 75 friends signed up to get a monthly illustrated science newsletter from me by USPS. And I picked a topic for each issue. The front sort of columns in each issue were an unfortunate animal update, whether that had to do with it being maybe a little bit more on the icky side or whether it was an update I thought people needed to know about a conservation issue. I featured a scientist of the month every month, and I specifically was interested in focusing on, historically underrepresented scientists. And I focused on a little bit of carnal knowledge, which is my sort of euphemism for animal sex, and then an owl of the month. And then the back of every issue dives deeper into a particular topic. It's really fun, especially when you've spent the summer on the Maine coast, to talk about migration in the summer and the fall. And this was the migration issue that I did, pulling together a bunch of the latest research on the way that birds choose their migratory routes and the way that they might pass them down culturally across generations. And this is one that I did right as we were wrapping up the print version of this newsletter this summer, talking about also an example of humpback whale culture, where whale song has been documented being copied as it travels east off the coast of Australia with really high fidelity, that the whales are able to teach each other songs, but it is moving geographically. And it's yet another example of what scientists are finding more and more, which is that we might not be the only ones that have culture, depending how you define it, which is a hotly debated issue. And the newsletter, this is also my homage to Rachel Carson, who is forever a massive influence on my life and a real patron saint and kind of North Star for me in all the work that I do. Featuring tide pools and a young friend, Joy, who came to the show at the Carpenter's Boat Shop. And then he got to tide pooling afterwards, as you do. And the update reached a lot of people. And one of the things that really struck me, people were really excited to get things that were not bills in the mail, which they let me know they didn't get that often anymore. I mailed it in a craft envelope with labels made out of my handwriting. And so they could always tell that it was the update. And I set up a PO box where people could write to me. And what I really didn't expect, like this was a mail art project for my friends, and it grew to reach 400 people a month. And what I really didn't expect, I made it for my friends, my peers, and the people that wrote me at my PO box were young people. And what I experienced is that they basically were like, oh, cool. We're already in a conversation about animals. We welcome you to join us. We have questions. You better come prepared. We have some questions. And given that I was so incensed that Ranger Rick failed to publish any of my letters to the editor, it was really important to me when young people wrote me that I answer their question in the next issue and that they see their name in the issue. And I knew that it was having an impact because more young people wrote me when they saw other young people's names in the update. And so that was a really interesting thing for me to see, that my work was reaching different ages than I anticipated. And I started having a lot of conversations with parents about, like, I make work for adults and there's these sections and I wonder, and they were like, no problem at all. We read it together, and there are sections that I let them know they can read at a different time, or the way that you talked about that is in line with the way we're learning right now. And so that was also really interesting to learn from parents. So here are some happy customers. This is a social media project that I've been doing for the last year and a half. It's also a pandemic project that I started. I let you know at the beginning of our talk here that I am a performer, and performers that are in a pandemic, I find, get bored and we want attention. And so what I started doing was when I was facilitating, which I told you about a little while ago, I worked at a facilitation company, and facilitators are obsessed with how they use their time in conversation. And so we did a workshop as an organization. There were about 5 or 6 of us in the company, and we had someone come teach us how to hula hoop as like a little elective. When you're at a conference, maybe you've been to some, and there's like a fun activity everybody does together. And so from then on at that organization, when we would have team meetings, we would hula hoop and talk about what the issue was at hand. And so I learned to stand still and hula hoop. So I'm going to play you some video of this performance series that I've been doing on Instagram for the last year and a half by popular demand. I did not expect this project to go on this long. There's now 37,000 followers who enjoy these videos every week. And the ones that are in this reel have between 500,000 views and 1.5 million views, these videos. So it's really become its own beast. Anglerfish live thousands of feet below the ocean surface. The way that they reproduce is something called sexual parasitism. The males are like these itty bitty little underdeveloped critters that swim through the dark. And if they find a female anglerfish, they bite into her and then they basically dissolve and their tissues fuse and they hang on to her for the rest of their lives and become just like, as scientists have described it, a bulbous sac of testes. And they just like deliver sperm to her when she needs it because it's so hard to find food and a mate at that depth. Scientists this past summer discovered, like, if you get an organ transplant as a human, your body wants to reject it because you have an incredible immune system. Anglerfish are missing T cells and antibodies. And some of the females in those species have harems of these males hanging on. Besides humans, I believe the only other known mammals to live past the age of menopause are 5 species of toothed whale: beluga, narwhal, false killer whale, short-fin pilot whale, and orca. And scientists have wondered why. Why keep a hag around, right? What's a crone for? If you look at the example of the southern resident killer whale, they live in matrilineal family units. Daughters and their offspring and adult male sons live with their mother their entire lives. Grandmothers in these communities can live to be in their hundreds, as we've seen, and they are the keepers of the knowledge about where the good salmon hunting grounds are. So much so that adult male southern resident killer whales have been observed wandering the water, starving, after they have lost elderly mothers. 66 million years ago, massive asteroid hits planet Earth, right? Wipes out all land-based dinosaurs. And mammals, which have been little tiny shrew-like things up until this point, just eking out a living where they can, are like, holy shit, this is our fucking time. Big bad daddy dinosaurs. Sorry about the language. They start eating everything in sight. They're like, what if I did this? What if I lived here? What if my body was like this? There's this massive mammal speciation that happens. And we now call the Cenozoic era, in which we are living, the age of mammals. But this week in PLOS Biology, a group of scientists published a study basically saying, hey guys, when you talk about the Cenozoic era, you literally never mention snakes. And it's like, why? There are 4,000 species of them. They had the same burst dynamic of speciation and starting to eat everything in sight right after the dinosaurs died. So why aren't we also calling this the age of snakes? That's a little platter of that. And out of that body of work, I have been pursuing some visual questions. And about 5 years ago, from some drawings on Instagram, I was contacted by a book agent who let me know that she thought that perhaps there was a book in me. And I did everything I possibly could in my power to ghost her and get away and not actually do the thing I've only ever dreamed of doing, which is write a book. And we had a conversation last winter about some of my book ideas. And she really let me know that for my first book, what she thought I should do is the idea that is most clearly in front of me and the sort of most approachable, immediate, urgent, present topic. And given the year that I had just spent hula hooping about the private lives of animals, it became clear there was one option to start with. And so what I've been doing is visually exploring different modes that animals make a living and make more life. And it's really diverse. It's as diverse as there are animals. It's really brilliant, I would argue. Each animal is as evolved as we are for its particular niche, and it is as good, if not in some ways, maybe more seasoned at being on planet Earth, right? There's a lot of animals that have been here making babies a lot longer than us, and what can we learn from that? So these are some initial visual studies for the book. I had an open studio this fall at my studio. And again, really curious to see a lot of young people coming through, a lot of different age groups. Everyone stops in front of these and wants to talk about it. And the young people just go over to where the drawing activity is that I have laid out for them, and they do that. So this is initial sketches and me working out. One of the constraints for the book for me is that if the animal is going to make it into the book, I have to really like drawing the animal, because as we've talked about before in this conversation, I find that even though you wouldn't think it, sometimes my drawing is the first time something's been drawn, especially with some of this spider sex, which is maybe a little bit difficult to capture. And so I want to make sure that the animals are actually fun for me to draw, and that there's a lot of life and vibrance, and that they get their due justice in the book. So one of the ways that this project has unfolded is that I went down to Bentonville, Arkansas this fall, and I had an experience booth at a music festival where 10 to 20,000 people came to the festival, and we had hundreds of people coming by the experience booth every day. And for tips, they could request an animal off a chalkboard that I had already listed, and they got a hula hoop explainer about the way that animal made a living for itself in different ways. And lots of different folks came through. We had a really fun time. I also want visual contribution and thought contribution from viewers that are such a huge part of my practice in the book as it lands. And so I solicited drawings from folks. A lot of these animals were animals that they had already seen be hula hooped about, and they got prompts that they worked their way through in their drawing exercise. We had temporary tattoos made of my art of different carnal embraces. And people got temporary tattoos of these animals in various poses of love. And I have to tell you, my friend who's worked in marketing for years came down and she assisted me, and she had suggested the temporary tattoos. And those things at a music festival, people would come. I had hundreds of submissions of the drawing activities because everybody would see these animal sex tattoos at the music festival. And that is like exactly, I've never been to a music festival before in my life. I think that was my last one. I'm very grateful that they had me. But that was such strong currency at the music festival. So these are the hundreds of drawings that we got of people envisioning what it's like inside a termite colony, how the queen lives, and what it's like, the anglerfish sex description that I gave you a little earlier in the video. These are drawing submissions from people of what they think that might look like at the festival. And these, after the comics artist Linda Berry, I'm going to trace these and have them be in a couple of different moments in the book so that people get to play a part and see other people learning about these issues. I really view the book as a facilitated conversation. I really resist expert positioning. So the newsletter has transitioned online, and I also do a lot of reader surveys as part of my practice, and people really bring it when they do these reader surveys. So this was a recent newsletter issue where I shared back with folks the results of the survey that they participated in last spring. I illustrated the results, and what I had asked them in the spring was, okay, here's how a spotted hyena clan works. It's a really tightly run matriarchy. There's an alpha female who dominates the clan. She has offspring, and if they survive, her offspring grow up in something called youngest rank ascension, which is that the youngest born outranks all of their siblings immediately and inherits essentially the throne. Kay Holcamp, who is an incredible scientist, I highly recommend you follow up looking her work up. She's maintained the longest continuous field study of spotted hyenas in the world since the 80s in the Masai Mara in Kenya. She's out of Michigan, and she has recently published findings that alpha females dose their babies in utero with an elevated level of androgens, more so than other female spotted hyenas do their cubs in the embryo. And she also has found that when a young female is born to an alpha female, she inherits her mother's social connections and network. There are instances of this hierarchy being overthrown, and that usually works by lower ranking females teaming up and one by one having successful confrontations with females moving up the chain. So the readers let me know that 18% of them wanted to be the alpha female who runs things. And I've started illustrating what the actual comments are, because there's a comment section, and people kill me. I'm a diplomatic top. Think Dame Judi Dench. I am a Leo. I'd rather make the rules than inherit them. 14% of respondents let me know that they would actually challenge the alpha female for the throne. There was a lot of sort of indictments of inherited privilege. Seems edgiest and high drama. You have to have ambitions. And so all of these animals that I'm illustrating these responses through live around the hyenas. They're watching the hyenas maintain their lives. And I'm trying to kind of match the character of the animal with the sentiment, the revolutionary sentiment or not. And then this is some of the work that I got to do at the Carpenter's boat shop. This is outside landscape drawing in the sun, down by the river, in the bugs as well. These are some landscape pieces. I think Alicia has one of these on the path down to the water from the boat shop. Our friend, the cormorant, going about their business. And then great blue heron on the water from the stream. So my time at the Carpenter's boat shop came exactly perfectly for what I needed because it was unstructured and because I got to really partner with Alicia on what it might look like. I had just left NRDC. I was just beginning to turn my attention to identifying as a book writer and an artist for hire, and getting to have that time at the boat shop as kind of an incubator for my next stage and a moment of rest, and really getting to just be outside, take breaks and talk to folks that were working on something completely different than I was focusing on was a really needed moment for me to reset and re-engage with my practice. And I'm really excited to see where the boat shop residency goes and to hopefully get to continue supporting it. So that's a little bit about me and my work and my time at the boat shop. And thank you so much for having me.
Perrin, you're the best. That was outstanding. Thank you. Yes. So folks, bring in those questions. I'm going to start off. If you put them in the chat box, I will ask the question, especially if we have time. But I'm going to start us off here, Perrin.
Question?
So first question to you, Perrin, is I've been reading about this seahorse today, the male being the only animal kingdom member who gives birth. I'm wondering if Perrin has any drawings on the birth moment of the seahorse, which evidently 1,500 offspring are released into the world.
Men carry them. Can you mute us?
Yes, so that's right. I want to send you all, I have a video about this. And I also have a drawing. Let me see if I can show this. So yes, this is true. There's an elaborate courtship ritual that happens where the female is holding her eggs and she needs to make sure that the male, first of all, he does all of these routines where he shows her that his pouch is empty, that he's really ready for her eggs. And then she puts her eggs in him, and then he inseminates them in his pouch. And then he incubates them, and they have found that he has a lot of the same hormones running through his body as other pregnant animals do, typically female. And then he goes through the process of letting them out. So can you see here? Can you see this? We have our elaborate courtship here. Can you see my cursor? And then this is where the seahorse dad is giving live birth through a series of contractions. Can you all see that?
Sure can. Yep.
I will say it's many, many seahorses. And so this is my first stab at drawing all the little babies. It's an engaged, it's for someone possibly more patient than me as an artist, but I'll keep trying.
Perrin, what are your favorite animals that you most enjoy drawing?
That I most enjoy drawing is different than my favorite animals. I find dolphins very difficult to draw, but they will forever be my muses. When I'm sad and very drained, I always go back to drawing squid and jellyfish. I just find it really cozy. They're very generous. Their lines, their shapes, they're a generous animal to the artist, I think.
Perrin, will you share an anecdote where someone who has outside science encountered your work and has now been drawn into a practice of science?
That's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of my work is basically about, the initial kind of focus was just getting adults who could take an action, especially from inside a conservation organization, to pause for a second and take an action. And then when I left NRDC, it became more focused on getting them to pause for a second and consider that it matters more than just a neat anecdote that they consider animals. I don't know if I have data points for people going into the sciences, but I do have a lot of people that send me a lot of articles every day that they have now found on the internet that they think I might like about science. And well, I have two more things to say about that. With young people, hyenas are one of my most admired animals, and it's talking about female spotted hyenas, because they have such unique anatomy. They have an externalized clitoris, which is a big part of the way that they maintain control of their societies. You can't talk about female spotted hyenas without really getting into anatomy. And so when I post those videos, I'm never really certain who's going to be into it. And this person I don't know that follows me posted a series of videos of her daughter doing a diorama project for school from my videos. And I was like, okay, you know what? You do you. Learn what you're going to learn. I will say this. There are videos, the internet to me is generally an extremely kind place. And I really want to make that the majority of people interacting with my videos are wonderful. And one of the things I notice with the increased exposure is that there is a potpourri of folks now commenting. And there are certain topics I find that make certain demographics particularly agitated and responsive. But in my view, if those people, and I don't know if I get a lot of comments that will say a quick Google search indicates, XYZ. So they're letting me know how I'm wrong. And a lot of my work, I'm reading journal papers. I'm reading multiple pieces of reporting on the journal papers. I'm in touch with scientists. I'm very careful. But if a lot of men are so mad at my video about orca menopause that they researched menopause that day long enough to come back to me with a retort, that's absolutely fine, because people are researching orca menopause. And that's my whole point. So I won.
You're awesome. All right. I got lots of questions. What are the most unusual animals or most unusual, most challenging to draw?
I find insects really hard to draw, which I think for me is about my laziness about their anatomy. They just have such a fundamentally different world orientation that I could just spend some time learning. But I find them difficult to draw. There's really, unless you're really working from like scanning electron microscope images, insects can be hard to give a ton of personality to. And so birds are a lot easier in that sense. Birds are so generous in terms of their expressiveness. And again, I find dolphin and whale, really dolphin bodies, very hard to draw. Dolphins are really deceptive because they are, I think, some of the greatest athletes that exist when you watch them in the ocean. But in order to maintain their stable body temperature, they're actually like a bit more roly-poly than meets the eye. But those two things come home to roost when you're trying to make all the lines connect. So I find dolphins deceptively difficult.
Perrin, will you share with us, how does your open studio work?
So I'm part of Gowanus Creative Studios. And one of the things that's nice about that, I have an art studio in a building where a lot of other artists have studios. And Gowanus Creative Studios has been partnering with a couple of different arts agencies in Gowanus for, I think this was the 20th year they did the open studios, but they put on an annual open studio, which means that kind of all the overhead for the event is handled, which makes it really fun to participate in. I also am always available for studio visits, so people can contact me directly and we can have a studio visit and I can walk you through what I'm working on in my practice and kind of let people in. I'm going to start doing a little bit more programming out of my studio because the book is so participatory to me. I would love to start having folks come and do some workshops.
Cool. will you share with us, how did the hula hoop idea come to you?
Just the dregs of the pandemic. I needed a new headshot. A friend had come over. We were like masked and then doing the headshot and masked. And she saw the hula hoop and was like, I was having trouble loosening up, if you can believe it, for the camera that day. And she suggested I pick up the hula hoop and give it a spin. And I did. And I remember stopping it with my hands while I was doing that. And I said to her, should I just stand in front of the camera on Instagram and tell whatever I know about science that day while I hula hoop? She was like, okay. And then I tried it, and the feedback was pretty strong and immediate. So I kept doing it.
Perrin, visual note-taking is a remarkable talent. And how have you learned to keep words and pictures in your mind simultaneously?
Well, it's funny because the last question makes me think of this, as does this one. Really, what we're just talking around is my diagnosed ADHD that I don't medicate, because I find that hula hooping while I talk to you about something complicated really works for me. And I just doodled my way through classes. Like it was how I already took notes, and people started noticing that and asking me for more. With the graphic recording, I think it also is about synthesizing. So for me, really the listening there, when I'm graphically recording, the listening is for, you start to get in the practice of letting a conversation unfold, and you're holding for what are the big ideas this person's going to say. And I don't know how to explain, you kind of wait to put down your big chunks of their top ideas, what you know are their leading points. And then you let the conversation that you're recording in the graphic recording kind of flow out around it as you can. People really like when there's been a joke made by the speaker that is tying together some part of their talk, and they see it reflected in the graphic recording, because your job is also, in part, in addition to reflecting the talk, to record a conversation that happened. So I don't know if that helps answer the question. A lot of it is just practicing and starting to kind of hang on. Speakers let you know with their rhythms, I find.
Perrin, how do you think art about animals can influence our policymakers and accelerate conservation?
Well, a lot of what, for me, that's a question for me a little bit in my NRDC hat, where I think that my art making there, which I did in partnership with advocates and other communicators, was, we only ever made videos when there was going to be a public campaign or a public comment period on a bill. So for instance, that puffin video I tried to show you that we can follow up, maybe Alicia, with a link for people so they can watch it. That was around a public comment period on the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and an attempt to repeal it. And so we made that video when we knew there would be a push. And I did that, in collaboration with people who were doing social media. It would go out in an email. And that, I think, when people are understanding, if you watch this video, you can go make public comments. Public comments matter. It works. It really does. I'm a really big believer in participating in the weeds of policymaking. In terms of my own work today, I'm really interested in kind of engagement campaigns. So it's less about driving people to action specifically, although I use my platform today to ask people to take actions, and they do. And I do a lot of you'll get a special extra hula hoop video if you send me proof of voting, or things like that to try to incentivize people. But a lot of my work right now is really about people figuring out what their own stake is by connecting to the material and making their own choices about what they're going to do next.
Perrin, what happens when you're talking and you drop the hula hoop? Do you have to start the talk again?
I don't know. It hasn't happened yet. Next question.
I have a comment, which is coming from Chelsea Fisher, who is our new program director here. And she says that she didn't realize until this evening that you are the silence hula hoop person. She's loved those videos. So
why, thank you.
Yeah. That might be a great note to end on. Unless I'll give you all, one more chance to add any questions. While you're thinking about a question for Perrin, I just want to say thank you so much, Perrin. Great evening. It's lovely to see your face, and I hope to see you soon.
Well, Alicia, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your work to get this residency going. I think it's a really exciting chapter for the boat shop in that regard.
I agree. Thanks for your help, Perrin. Okay, on that note, bye all you lovely faces
Thank you for
out there.
coming, everybody.
Yeah, she's
Thank you,
good.
Perrin. Thanks, Alicia.
Bye.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Perrin. That was really great.